Song Times. She is an award-winning journalist, playwright, and certified nonfiction book coach. Her poetry has appeared in Yellow Arrow Journal, Black Raven Review, Lost Boys Press, Parliament Literary Journal, and Passaic Feluspa.
Yeah, I don't know how to say that either.
Yeah. Her literary preoccupations include putting ordinary people in difficult situations to see how they wriggle out. Please give a genuine and warm Charm City Spec welcome to Amy L. Bernstein.
Thank you. Thank you for sticking around for me. I really appreciate it. I'm going to try and tip this up just a teeny weeny bit. Okay, isn't the spec genre amazing? Because look what you can do. You can write horror, you can write humor, you can write a moon epic, you can write fantasy. It's really incredible that when you start speculating, there's really no end to what you can do. And my book is yet another entirely different entry into that, because this really is, and I think maybe the woman at the far back left, this is dystopian. It's very dystopian. It is a mystery thriller, and it is very dark, and it definitely speculates the hell out of the world that we live in. I'm going to read to you from chapter 23, and here is all that you need to know. The story takes place in 2030, after a pandemic far deadlier than ours. The main character is Rags, and she's newly arrived in the small town of Canary. Flint is her boyfriend. The missing girl is named Effie. Piper is a PHP, a member of the Public Health Police Force, and Piers is local law enforcement. Here we go. Gripping her data phone as though it might decide to fly away on its own, Rags walked quickly to the office, determined to make sense of the data Flint had detangled during the night. The side streets in her neighborhood were eerily quiet as usual, but as soon as she turned onto Main Street, it appeared that Canary was creating a new normal for itself. Yellow circles had been freshly painted along the sidewalks to indicate how far apart people were required to stand or distance themselves while walking. Digital paper had been affixed to every window, every commercial front door, with bright letters sliding across the screens like modern ticker tape. Keep your distance. Respirators required at all times. Report suspicious activity immediately. Safety violators will be prosecuted. Rags knew this had to be Piper's work, and he'd worked very quickly. Overnight, Canary had begun transforming into a place that felt occupied. Perhaps invaded is more accurate, Rags thought. A band of 6 men and women in black coveralls, similar in style to the ones the PHP wore, were walking up and down the sidewalks in blackjack boots, no less, clipping collars and leashes on roaming terriers, collies, retrievers, and assorted mutts. Rags watched as they kicked some of the dogs into submission, yanking tightly on the leashes as the animals squealed and barked in protest. An awful image arose in Rags's mind, the dogs all being thrust into the crematorium at once, yelping as they were consumed by the white-hot flames. Surely not, she thought. Surely not even Piper. People milled around watching the small sea of black coveralls at work. None of the bystanders spoke up or sought to stop them. "What are you doing with them?" Rags said loudly, approaching the band of uniformed men and women. "Step back," one of the men said. Rags ignored him. As they were all masked and gloved and identically dressed, it was impossible to recognize any of them. Rags had no way to know whether they'd been recruited from the local population or imported from outside. Given Piper's paranoia, she suspected they were all local citizens, perhaps including many who'd shuffled innocently into the township meetings she'd attended. "Health hazard," one of the women said, yanking 3 dogs at once. "They've got to be removed." Rags didn't believe a word of that. In all her time in Canary, she'd never seen any of the wild dogs foaming at the mouth, let alone attacking people. What sort of health hazard could the animals possibly pose? What information did these brainwashed, uniformed recruits have that she didn't have? They don't know a thing. Rags noted that everyone in the crew wore black lanyards with blinking green discs hanging from their necks, a sign, she assumed, that they'd personally been scrubbed clean, all traced, cleared, and purified. Perhaps in their own eyes, they'd been sanctified to do whatever it was they'd been assigned to do. The dogs would just be the beginning, certainly. I said, step back into the circle, the same man said. Now! Who's in charge? Who ordered you to do this? Rags persisted. Leave them alone, one of the bystanders shouted at Rags. Let them do their job. That's right, shouted another. Like nearly everyone in Canary, they were all dressed casually, even haphazardly, in varying shades of browns and grays. They were generally pale, despite weeks of bright sun, and no one carried an ounce of extra body fat. And they, too, were impossible to tell apart, thanks to the respies covering 2/3 of their faces. The bystanders were spaced out among several of the yellow circles on the sidewalk, symmetrically arrayed as if they were lining up in formation, lining up like a marching band, a band of soldiers, a band of prisoners about to march to their deaths. Is this what Canary will become? Are any of you feeling sick or know anyone who is? Rags shouted to the shrouded onlookers. All of them reflexively looked to the dog catchers as if they needed that group's permission to speak. But the dog catchers had by now taken a dozen barking dogs in hand and were heading in the direction of the high school. Are you? She repeated, hoping they'd feel they could speak freely now. None of your damn business, said a woman standing in one of the yellow circles. She reminded Rags of Mary because she had long gray hair and because of her attitude, as if she couldn't see where her own best interests might lie. You're with the newspaper, aren't you? Asked a man from another circle. We don't have to talk to you. You can't make us. Where the hell is your mask? Came another voice from another circle. You're putting all of us in danger, you know. And breaking the law, someone shouted. I'm just trying to tell the truth about what's going on, Rags said to as many bystanders as she could reach with her voice. Don't you want that? To know the truth? She was standing in the middle of Main Street now, facing the people standing in their circles. This felt like a tribunal. What I know is that we can't be too careful, said one of the men from his circle. We won't beat this thing if we don't follow the rules. Beat what thing? Rags said. If you have to ask, you're already in trouble, said someone loudly from farther down the sidewalk. And we don't want any trouble, do we? Things are bad enough. Rags saw nods of assent ripple across the circles. I should report you, shouted one of the women. Everyone nodded again. Rags wondered if any of these people had been responsible for setting the newspaper on fire on her front porch. Such a chicken shit thing to do. She gave up on them and continued walking toward her office, glancing behind her once or twice to make sure the mob had not decided to follow. She walked straight down the middle of Main Street to avoid the circles, which she considered an artificial and unnecessary imposition, given that there was zero evidence to support that they were needed. She walked past the peacekeeper's office, which also had the digital ticker with its warning message affixed to the old front door. She knew Piers would hate that, even if he might try to laugh it off. She wondered where he'd gone, and when she'd hear from him, but had no time to deal with that now. She walked past the alley that led to Louisa's hidden gallery oasis. She longed for a day when she could shut out the shit show swirling around her and just hang out with Louisa, studying her artwork. Before reaching the current office, Rags heard gunshots ring out, one after another, leaving behind a series of echoes. The shots seemed to go on forever, though they probably only lasted 15 seconds. The dogs, she thought. It had to be the dogs. Killed on the high school athletic field, no doubt, execution style. That's where the black-clothed brigade seemed to be heading and where the shots were coming from. Killed just yards from where Effie Rudder had tossed her red pom-poms in the air and Jackson Turner had spiraled a football. To Rags, it was another sign the Canary was in deep trouble. As soon as Rags reached her desk, she flipped on a screen and called up the file Flint had given her. She couldn't dwell on the dogs now. Instead, she sent a message to Deneen, who was of the best among the freelancers at wheedling information out of people. Rags asked her to head over to the field right away and begin investigating, and to get pictures of any incriminating evidence, if at all possible, like blood on the field, a lost collar, anything. She told her to start asking questions of everyone who seemed to be within earshot of the shootings. She warned Deneen it wouldn't be pretty, but she was trusting her with an important job and was counting on her. Mary was not in the office. Rags had no idea where she went or what she did when she wasn't there during normal working hours, but she couldn't dwell on that either. It was for the best, anyway, given the chore ahead.
Thanks so much. Does anybody have a question for Amy?
Yeah. So I'm curious about your process. So do you start out with a theme of what you want to say and then build a story around it, or do you start out with characters, or how do you work?
For me, it's different for every. It's different for every book. I get an idea in my gut, and then I just have to see where that idea is going to go. And this one occurred to me very, very, very early in the pandemic. I had a feeling that we were going to be living through something really historic, and I wanted to push past whatever it is we're about to live through and sort of come out the other side and see how we might look. And it isn't pretty.
Question?
I've asked a bunch. So it sounds as though, like you were saying, we're coming out on the other side of it. You talk about this being a pandemic that was even more deadly. Do you get into all the details, like, oh, it's airborne, or oh, it's in the water, or something like that? I mean, how detailed did you get with this pandemic?
Well, because the book is set after it's over, I'm much more interested in how people behave after a trauma and in an aftermath situation. So you do learn a little bit, but you don't need to know a lot, because you need to take your clues from how society is reorganizing itself rather than what they went through. It's kind of where are we now and what are we doing about it. So you do get some hints.
Okay.
One more?
Yeah, I have one.
Having read the book and enjoyed it, our book group read it, loved it, where did you come up with the idea for the ads? You know, the
Well, Donna, that's a very deep secret of the book. And I will say this. This is the first mystery that I wrote.
Right.
And I got about halfway through, and I kind of said, oh shit, I don't think I know how to tie this thing together, and all the pieces are flying off at like this, and I have to make them do this, and I don't know how to make them do this. So I just had to work really hard at putting puzzle pieces together, and the thing that you're referring to turned out to be an extremely important piece of a larger puzzle. And the cover's a little bit reflective of the old-fashioned, you know, when somebody would not want to, they would want to send an anonymous, like, horrible note or something. Yeah. And that's all I'll say about that.
okay.
I have one final question. It seems like killing a dog in fiction is some kind of unspoken third rail for a lot of people. And I feel like if indeed those dogs did die, which we don't have any final evidence of in the passage you read, that's a pretty hard blow to deliver to a certain class of readers who might have a similar animal in their own house, in their own family. Did you ever have any pause or misgivings about writing that section particularly?
My apologies to all the dog lovers to whom I did not give a trigger warning. I am sorry. I would answer it this way, in all seriousness. Human beings do terrible things. And sometimes we want to write about those things extremely head-on and extremely graphically. And sometimes we want to come up with what we might think of as proxy measures, where it seems pretty horrible, but it's not the most horrible thing that you can do. And so this functions, it's also a harbinger. If they can do that,
Yeah.
what else can they do?
So the dogs are dead.
People could be next.
Look on the website, doesthedogdie.com.
Thank you, would you start that for me? Let's get that.
Let's all give a big round of applause to Amy L. Bernstein. Thank you so much.